Ethan Hartwell's voice cut through the evening drizzle as Sophie Bennett reached the bottom step of the stone porch. The autumn rain was light but steady, misting the walkway in silver. She turned sharply, her dark braid damp, her canvas tote slung over one shoulder. Her tired but steady eyes met his. "Is something wrong, Mr. Hartwell?" Ethan took a step forward. "Where are you going in such a hurry? You've been leaving early a lot lately." Sophie's expression didn't change, but she adjusted the strap of her bag. "I have personal matters to attend to. My shift ended at 7. I believe I'm free to go." Ethan narrowed his eyes not unkindly, but with concern. "I heard you on the phone last night. You sounded stressed. You said you needed a large sum of money. Is everything all right?" For a second, Sophie froze just long enough for him to notice. "That was a private conversation," she replied, her voice tight. "I know it was. But you care for my son. He adores you. I just need to know if there's something I should be worried about." Sophie's grip on her tote tightened. "If you no longer trust me, perhaps you should find someone else to watch Jacob." Ethan flinched. That hurt more than it should have. She turned and descended the stairs quickly, her boots splashing in shallow puddles. Within moments, she was swallowed by the darkness beyond the front gate, the porch light flickering behind her, casting long, uncertain shadows. Inside, the mansion felt emptier than usual. Ethan walked back into his study, poured himself a whiskey, and stared out through the rain-streaked windows. The house once built to impress now echoed with silence. He had designed it that way, clean, controlled, impenetrable, a place without surprises. But Sophie, she was different. Since she started working there 6 months ago, she had brought something to the house he hadn't realized he missed: warmth. Jacob, once withdrawn since his mother's death, had opened up. He laughed again. He played. He smiled. And it was Sophie who had drawn that out of him. That morning, Ethan had watched from the hallway as Jacob, still in his pajamas, tugged at Sophie's hand and whispered, "Can you stay tonight? Just until I fall asleep?" Sophie had smiled soft and sincere and knelt to tuck his stuffed bear into the crook of his arm. "Not tonight, sweetheart. But I'll be back first thing in the morning. That's a promise." Ethan had felt something in his chest then. Something quiet. Something hopeful. But now, after her sudden departure and the phone call he'd overheard, he replayed the words in his mind. "I need it soon. No, I can't ask anyone else. I'm doing everything I can. No." Mention of a family emergency. No context. Just desperation. He knew what his mind wanted to do. Protect his son. But his heart was conflicted. Sophie had never been anything but kind. Still, secrets, especially when tied to money, never ended well. He'd learned that painfully after Emily. After watching people change the moment they realized how much he was worth. His fingers hovered over the security panel. A few clicks, and the screen lit up. He reviewed footage from the day before. Sophie arriving right on time, brushing Jacob's hair, organizing his art supplies, reading bedtime stories on the couch. Nothing suspicious, nothing wrong, except the call. She had stepped out onto the back terrace, phone pressed close. She hadn't seen the camera's angle. "I'm trying." I said I'm trying. "I just need more time. Don't give up on me." Ethan muted the clip. The tone in her voice strained. Anxious played over and over in his head. It wasn't fear. It was pressure. Desperation. He stood abruptly, drink forgotten. He didn't want to be this man, the one who doubted good people. But if something was happening behind his back, and it put Jacob in danger, he needed to know. Pulling on his coat, he grabbed his keys and headed for the garage. He slid behind the wheel of his black Range Rover and started the engine, the quiet hum filling the silence. Through the windshield, the rain blurred the world into streaks of light and shadow. He pulled out slowly, headlights off. keeping his distance as he turned down the street in the direction Sophie had gone. Maybe she was just trying to survive. Maybe she had a past she was hiding. Maybe she was everything she claimed to be. Or maybe, just maybe, he was about to uncover something that would change everything he thought he knew. Tonight, he would follow her. Tonight, he would find the truth, even if it broke the only fragile connection he had left. Ethan's black Range Rover idled to blocks from the mansion, its headlights off, engine low. Rain traced lines down the windshield. As he watched Sophie board the city bus, her canvas tote hugged tightly to her side. She didn't look back. He followed from a careful distance, heart pounding. This felt wrong, like betrayal, but the suspicion refused to quiet. She was hiding something. He needed to know what. The bus traveled south, leaving behind the city's glass towers and winding into older neighborhoods. Ethan's eyes tracked every turn, his grip tightening on the wheel. Finally, Sophie stepped off in a neglected district, cracked sidewalks, flickering street lamps, graffiti-tagged buildings. She crossed the street and entered a faded blue building with a crooked sign, Bright Horizons Community Center. Ethan parked across the street. Through rain-speckled windows, he saw her greeted warmly by a gray-haired woman, then ushered into a brightly lit room filled with children. Some sat on mats, others fidgeted with crayons and paper. Sophie knelt among them, her voice lost behind the glass. From her tote, she pulled out books, markers, paper dolls. A small girl hesitated at first, then slowly moved closer as Sophie helped her draw a stick figure house with flowers out front. Sophie smiled, gentle, patient, real. A boy sneezed behind her. Without hesitation, she pulled a scarf from her own neck and wrapped it around his. Ethan blinked. The scarf was hand-knit. He'd seen her working on it in the mansion during her lunch breaks. She hadn't made it for herself. He watched for nearly an hour. Sophie read stories aloud. She crouched to meet children at eye level. She adjusted buttons on a little boy's coat. She held a crying girl until she calmed. She laughed when they laughed. She moved as if this place, this crumbling, underfunded space, was her true home. Ethan leaned back in his seat, overwhelmed. She hadn't been hiding deceit. She'd been hiding kindness. He looked at the box of pastries beside him, leftovers from his kitchen staff. Without thinking, he scribbled a note for the children from someone who believes in them. He placed it with the box, crossed the street, and quietly left it just inside the community center's door before retreating to his car. Through the window, he watched as Sophie found the package. She paused, puzzled, then smiled soft and slow. She read the note twice. He saw her touch her chest briefly. Ethan exhaled. The next morning, Sophie arrived for work 10 minutes late, cheeks flushed, hair damp from the walk. She held the note in her hand. "Mr. Hartwell," she said carefully, standing just inside the kitchen. "Did you leave something at Bright Horizons?" He didn't turn. "Maybe." "Why?" Finally, he faced her. "Because I was wrong about you." She blinked. "You followed me." He nodded. "Once. I thought you were stealing." "I did." His voice was low. "But I saw something else. You with those kids. It was beautiful." Sophie looked down at the note. "They love the pastries. Thank you." "You shouldn't have to do it alone," he said. "Let me help." She hesitated. "This isn't charity." "I know," he replied. "It's admiration." Their eyes met, and for the first time, something soft passed between them, like the beginning of trust. Ethan sat at his desk in the study, the afternoon sun casting long shadows. Across the dark wood, his laptop screen displayed a modest website, plain, functional, heartfelt. Bright Horizons Community Center, serving the city's forgotten families. He scrolled through blurry photos of volunteers, community dinners, after school programs. In the corner of one picture, Sophie knelt beside a child, holding a paper heart with "Believe in Yourself" scrawled in crayon. They were running out of funding. Donations were down. The heater had broken twice this winter. Ethan closed the browser and leaned back, silent. That evening, he made a few discreet calls. By midnight, a shell company he often used for anonymous philanthropy had wired $50. Zero to Bright Horizons. He slept better than he had in weeks. The next day, he lingered longer than usual in the kitchen. Sophie arrived in her usual quiet way, hair tucked behind her ears, sleeves rolled up. "Good morning, Mr. Hartwell," she said, setting down her bag. "Sophie," he said, pretending to sip coffee. "How's Jacob doing with his letters?" She smiled. "Getting better. He writes his name backwards sometimes, but he's proud of it." Ethan chuckled. "Sounds like his mother." Sophie's smile faded slightly, but she nodded. "He talks about her." "I hope you don't mind answering questions," he said carefully. "I was wondering, what made you want to work with children?" Sophie's hand stilled over the lunch she was packing. "I grew up in a group home. No parents, no siblings. Just a rotating door of social workers and bunk beds." She took a quiet breath. "There was one volunteer who came every week to read to U.S. She brought paperbacks and cookies. She only stayed a year, but I never forgot her." Ethan said nothing, afraid of interrupting the rare openness in her voice. "I promised myself if I ever got out, I'd do the same for someone else." Jacob ran into the kitchen at that moment, still in socks. "Miss Sophie, look. I drew us in the park." She knelt, examining the scribbled stick figures. "Beautiful. Jacob, you even remembered the slide." Ethan watched her, the way she tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, the softness in her voice. She had given his son something he hadn't been able to give himself: family. That evening, when Sophie left for Bright Horizons, Ethan placed a small wrapped box on the table by the door. Inside was a deluxe set of colorful building blocks, enough for 10 children. He added a note in clean, careful handwriting: "For Jacob and his friends, from someone who believes in play." The next morning, Sophie picked up the box with gentle fingers. "This wasn't here yesterday," she murmured. "Jacob mentioned his friends didn't have many toys," Ethan said, feigning casualness. She narrowed her eyes, then softened. "Thank you. I'll make sure they get it." Ethan nodded, hiding the twist in his chest. Hope. That was what she gave him subtly, steadily, without asking for anything in return. And for the first time in years, Ethan wanted to give something back. The morning light streamed softly through the tall windows of the Hartwell living room, casting golden patches across the floor where Jacob sat, his coloring book spread wide. Sophie knelt beside him, her voice gentle as she read aloud from a picture book about a bear who built a treehouse for his friends. Ethan leaned against the doorway, watching them from a distance. There was something soothing in the cadence of Sophie's voice, something grounding in the way. Jacob nestled close to her side. When the story ended, Sophie closed the book and ruffled Jacob's hair. "Go wash your hands before breakfast, okay, buddy?" Jacob nodded and skipped off toward the bathroom. Ethan stepped forward. "You're really good with him." Sophie looked up, surprised. "Thank you." He hesitated. "Can I ask you something personal?" She tensed slightly. "I suppose. Last week, when I followed you," he stopped, suddenly unsure how to phrase it. "I saw what you were doing at the community center, but I still don't understand why I keep it a secret." Sophie exhaled slowly. "Because people don't always see good intentions. They see distractions, lack of professionalism. I worried you'd think I wasn't dedicated enough to this job." "I don't," Ethan said quietly. "I think what you're doing is remarkable." She sat on the couch, curling her hands in her lap. "There's a girl, Lena. She's 9. Lost both parents in a fire last year. She doesn't talk much. Won't meet anyone's eyes. The therapist at Bright Horizons said she needs regular sessions, maybe medication. But we don't have the funds." Ethan felt a dull ache in his chest. "I've been working weekends at a bookstore," Sophie continued, "trying to cover the cost for one session a week. That's why I've left early a few times. Not because I don't care about Jacob. He sat down across from her. I never should have doubted that. She smiled faintly. I've never had much. Grew up counting coins for milk. People assume you're lazy or irresponsible if you come from nothing. I've worked so hard to build trust in this role. I didn't want to jeopardize that. Ethan's throat tightened. I understand. She glanced up. Do you? He nodded. I lost my wife 3 years ago. Cancer. Quick and cruel. After that, I stopped letting people in. Everyone wanted something: money, access, influence. I became someone who checked security footage instead of asking questions. I was scared to trust. Sophie's eyes shimmered. That kind of loss, I can't imagine. I think, he said, voice low. We're both a little afraid of being hurt, of being seen. She gave a shaky laugh. You'd think helping others would make us feel braver, but it doesn't always make us feel safe. Silence settled between them. Then, quietly, Sophie said, sometimes I wonder if someone like me with my past can ever be truly loved. Ethan's chest twisted. You deserve more than love. You deserve safety, belief, respect. Her shoulders trembled. You don't know how much I needed to hear that. He didn't reach for her hand. He didn't dare. But in that moment, something shifted an understanding, a thread of fragile trust. That afternoon, Ethan made a call to a private therapy network. He ranged through an affiliated nonprofit to sponsor Lena's treatment. Weekly sessions with a trauma specialist, fully covered. No name attached. The next time Sophie came home from Bright Horizons, her eyes were red but shining. The therapist said they received a grant for Lena, a full scholarship. I don't know who arranged it, but he smiled. Sometimes good things find their way, too. Good people. Neither of them said anything more, but they both felt it, the quiet healing that comes not from grand gestures, but from finally being seen. The grand ballroom of the Bright Horizons gala shimmered with crystal chandeliers and soft golden light. Tables, draped in white linen, were surrounded by well-dressed guests, community leaders, donors, parents, and children whose lives had been touched by the center dot at the far end. A raised stage was set for tonight's presentation. Sophie stood behind the podium, her dark hair softly framing her face. She wore a deep blue dress, simple yet elegant, and her eyes scanned the room, filled with familiar faces. Parents she had comforted, children she had taught. Her heart thumped in her chest. Good evening, everyone, she began, voice steady. A hush fell as she continued. I stand here tonight because of Bright Horizons and because of the extraordinary people who believe in its mission. But there's someone here who changed everything for me. She paused. A faint murmur rippled through the audience. Sophie took a breath. He asked me to call him someone special, and I want to thank him for helping me believe I deserve to dream bigger. Ethan sat at a table near the front, heart pounding. He saw the way the audience turned to look at him. Where once suspicion and uncertainty had filled his chest, now only anticipation and pride remained. He lifted his hand in a small wave, hidden behind his champagne flute. Sophie reached the final line. So thank you, she said softly, for reminding me that my past does not define my future. Applause swelled. She stepped away from the podium. Scanning the room, and saw Ethan rising slowly from his seat, eyes bright with emotion. Ladies and gentlemen, the gala MC stepped forward. We have one final surprise. Please welcome Mr. Ethan Hartwell to the stage. Ethan crossed the room, suit jacket barely moving, and stepped onto the stage. The applause grew louder. He cleared his throat. As he spoke, his voice carried through the room with sincerity. Good evening. I am humbled to stand here tonight to finally say what I should have said a long time ago. A few months back, I anonymously supported Bright Horizons because I believed in its mission. I met this woman who embodies everything it stands for: compassion, resilience, love. Her name is Sophie Bennett. Sophie's hand flew to her mouth. The audience leaned forward. I followed her to this very park, to bright horizons, to see for myself how she taught and held our children together. I watched her pour her heart into kids who needed more than just help, they needed hope. And I realized I was wrong to doubt her. I was wrong to think her story was anything but beautiful. He paused, voice thickening. Sophie, I'm sorry for not trusting you sooner. I fell in love with your kindness long before I understood it. I love you, and I want to say that publicly because you deserve to be seen for who you truly are. Silence held the room. Then the audience burst into applause, soft at first, then building into a standing ovation. Tears glistened in many eyes, Sophie's included. Ethan offered his hand to Sophie. She stepped forward, heart pounding. He took her hand gently, guiding her to stand beside him, and to Ethan's delight, Jacob waddled up behind Sophie, wrapping her waist in his small arms. "Mommy," he called, loud enough that the crowd fell silent again. A gasp went through the room. Sophie knelt to embrace him, tears streaming down her face as Ethan wrapped his free arm round both of them. "They are my heart," Ethan said, "and they are my family." Soft gasps. More applause. Sophie rose, looked out at the faces, then locked eyes with Ethan. "My family," she whispered. Ethan reached behind his back, withdrew a small velvet box, and knelt one knee on the stage. "Sophie Bennett, will you make me the happiest man alive? Will you marry me? And will you let Jacob and me build a life of trust, love, and purpose with you?" Silence. Then cheers erupted. Sophie nodded, tears falling freely. He opened the box to reveal a delicate ring engraved with 3 tiny names: Sophie, Ethan, Jacob. He smiled up at her. A single nod, and the audience rose in whoops and applause. Ethan rose, placed the ring on her finger, and they shared a gentle, heartfelt kiss. Cameras flashed. The room soared with joy. Then Ethan cleared his throat. "Before we lose the moment," he said, voice light but full of emotion, "I want to announce something." He stepped back to the edge of the stage. "Starting tonight, I am establishing the Sophie Bennett Scholarship Fund in honor of Sophie's dedication to education and children. This fund will support orphaned and low-income children in pursuing their college dreams, because everyone deserves hope." The crowd erupted anew in cheers. Sophie covered her mouth, stunned. Ethan stepped forward, sweeping her into a warm hug. He had come to give her everything he could: love, trust, respect. And now she would carry his name into the future, helping countless others find hope. Jacob, still wrapped around her waist, grinned, and the family stood there together, soaking in the love and celebration. The gala closed with laughter, toasts, dancing. But on the stage, under the warm light, Sophie and Ethan stood hand in hand, his arms secure round her, hers resting on his heart. They had conquered their fears. Built trust across 2 worlds. And now, love blossomed. Fully. It was more than reconciliation. It was rebirth. And tonight, everyone present witnessed it. The sun dipped low over the Pacific, casting golden hues across the waves as they kissed the shore. The breeze was soft, gentle, tugging lightly at Sophie's long, dark hair as she walked barefoot along the beach, hand in hand with Ethan. Jacob skipped just ahead of them, his laughter bright and pure against the music of the ocean. It had been a month since the gala, and life had shifted, not with the force of a storm, but with the quiet certainty of a tide. Bright horizons continued to thrive. Sophie had accepted a leadership role, guiding programs for children like she once was. Ethan stepped back from daily corporate affairs, choosing instead to invest in people and purpose. And Jacob, he no longer woke crying in the night. His nightmares had been replaced by bedtime stories and morning hugs. As the trio strolled the shoreline, Ethan paused. He turned to Sophie, his eyes catching the last fire of sunset. "There's something I want to ask you," he said softly. Sophie smiled, amused. Another surprise. He nodded, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Opening it, he revealed a simple, elegant ring its center a tiny carved star. A star, she whispered. For hope, he replied. For the light you brought into our lives. Sophie, will you marry me? Will you be our home? She blinked back tears, laughter catching in her throat. Yes, she breathed. Yes, Ethan. 1,000 times yes. Jacob ran back just in time to see Ethan slip the ring onto her finger. Are we a family now? He asked, hopeful eyes searching theirs. Sophie knelt and pulled him into her arms. We always were, sweetheart. Ethan joined them, wrapping his arms round both. They stood that way, the three of them framed by sky and sea. Later, Jacob drew in the wet sand with a stick, 3 stick figures holding hands under a smiling sun. Above them, in uneven letters, he wrote, My family. Ethan read the words, then turned to Sophie. I was so afraid once. Afraid to trust, to feel. But you were worth a leap. She leaned against him. So were you? A pause. Then, softer, thank you for watching over us. He kissed her temple. Always.